Hello, my sweet friends, and welcome to DIY with Nadia. Today, I'm sharing my top 20 easy fall tier tray DIYs. To start this project, I'm going to grab one of these little jar signs from the Dollar Tree, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove, excuse my cat over here, I'm going to remove the jute cord. Then using a letter opener, I just slid it underneath that galvanized lid and I took that off. And now I'm just removing the tag because we're going to be using the backside of this jar. Those stickers usually leave a little bit of residue behind, so I'm just grabbing a piece of sandpaper and smoothing that area out. Then I'm going to paint the sides of my jar and the back with 2 coats of the white chalk Rust-Oleum paint in linen white. Next, I'm grabbing some gray acrylic paint and I'm going to paint that lid twice and let it dry. Using the same gray paint, I'm grabbing these wood shapes, and these are stickers that you can find at the Target dollar spot, and I decided to choose the word thankful. I'm going to paint that gray. Also, this little gourd or squash, whatever this is, that's also going to get painted gray. And then when I decided to add the pumpkin, I decided to add a little bit of white and make that pumpkin a little lighter gray. Next, I'm going to add dimension just by adding white, and then I'm going to just play around, keep on adding a little gray, a little bit more white, and then I'm going to do that for the gourd, the pumpkin, and also for the jar lid. There's really no right or wrong way to do this, but just remember the pumpkin's grooves go from top to bottom, and you just follow along and just keep on going. As far as the jar lid, I just went from side to side, making it look like the light was hitting it from different angles. As easy as that, you just brought life and dimension to all your little parts, and you took this project to another level just by adding a little white. Next, I'm just going to hot glue everything in place, and even though there are stickers on these, the thankful sign and the gourd stuck straight onto my jar, so that was fine. But for the pumpkin, because it was going on top of the gourd, I added just a little bit of hot glue. I'm going to start this little project by using this wooden little truck from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to give it 2 coats of gray acrylic paint. I gave my truck plenty of time to dry, and now I'm going to paint all the tires with this white chalk Rust-Oleum paint, and I'm going to give it 2 coats. Using a small brush, I'm just making little stripes in the car, more like dry brushing. I'm just going back and forth, left to right, really focusing on the edges of the truck. To make little dots on my tires, I'm just grabbing the back of my paintbrush, dipping it in the gray paint, and just straight onto the center of the tires. Now I'm just grabbing a pumpkin from the Dollar Tree, and this is the medium size one, and I'm just going to give it 2 coats of white chalk Rust-Oleum paint and let it dry. Next, I'm grabbing a little bit of my white paint, then adding some gray paint, and I'm going to go in between the grooves of the pumpkin to give it dimension, and I'm just going to go back and forth, adding the gray, the white, until I feel like it looks good. Next, I removed the pumpkin stump and added a little bit of paint right there, and also gave it a little bit of white and gray, mixed it in, and that is it. My pumpkin is all done as far as the paint. To attach the pumpkin, I first decided how I wanted to sit on top of the truck, and then very lightly pressed on that wooden circle that's on top of the truck just to give me an outline where my pumpkin's gonna go. And then I used some forceps I had on hand and poked through that area so that it sits really nicely on top of that little circle. Then added some hot glue, with the pumpkin on, and we're all done. For the pumpkin stump, I'm just using a piece of a branch and then poking it through the top center of the pumpkin. For this sweet little project, I'm going to be using this wallpaper that I got from the Dollar Tree and this plank. And yes, that wallpaper is what you see in the back of my table actually. As you can see, I started a little bit with the project to give us a head start. And all I'm doing here is measuring how much I need, and I'm sticking the pieces of wallpaper straight onto my wooden pieces. Next, I'm going to cut really thin pieces of the wallpaper, and I'm going to stick it on the wooden pieces that are going horizontal so that the overall look of my fence looks like it's all white wood. Now we're going to make a sweet little bow with needle and thread. I'm grabbing a gray grosgrain ribbon. This one is 1/2 inch, and just made a 2-loop simple bow, and then in the middle, I'm going to connect it with needle and thread. And then this is where I just go around the center of the bow a few times and then tighten it up. And that's what's going to make the bow pop, and it's going to make the sweetest little bow. Now all I have to do is just make a few knots in the back and our bow is done. To stand my project up, I'm going to grab 2 of these Jenga blocks from the Dollar Tree. Mine are painted white because they were left over from a previous project, but all I'm going to do is just hot glue them to 2 of my wooden pieces in the back. And now I'm just grabbing this mini wreath and I'm going to hot glue it towards the top of my project. In the description box, I will attach the link where I got these little mini wreaths. And now on top of that wreath, I'm going to add my little bow. And then in the middle of the bow, I decided to add a little wooden bead. And that is it for this very simple but beautiful project. For this project, I'm going to be using the sign that I got on clearance at Hobby Lobby and grabbing a flat brush. I'm going to paint the inside of the box. And with a flat brush, it's just very easy to keep that paint at the bottom of the picture without going onto the sides. Next, I'm grabbing this kind of olive green eucalyptus and I'm going to snip off a few branches. And then to make them shorter on some sides, I snipped them shorter. Next, I'm grabbing a pumpkin, and this pumpkin came in a bundle of leaves. I did replace the plastic stump of the pumpkin with a piece of a branch, and then I painted the pumpkin white. It was ivory already, so I just gave it one coat and let it dry. Now I'm just laying out and hot gluing my eucalyptus branches in place. And then in the top left corner, I hot glued the pumpkin in place, and we're all done with this quick and easy little project. This project, I'm going to use this foam little pumpkin and I'm going to give it 3 coats of the chalk Rust-Oleum paint in linen white. Because of the little dots on it, I had to give it an extra coat. Using a small paintbrush and a combination of gray and white acrylic paints, I'm just going to give this pumpkin dimension by going darker inside those grooves and just mixing in as I go along, lighter on top of the grooves and darker on the inside of the grooves. Next, I'm going to grab these natural wood slices, and they average at about 2.5 inches, and these 14mm round wooden beads. And all I'm doing is I'm going to stack these up. So I'm just going to put them all around my wooden slice. Next, I'm going to put hot glue all over the top of my beads and put another round on top. Next, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put beads all the way around, hot glue on top of all of those, and another wood slice on top. For the pumpkin stump, I'm just putting in a piece of a branch on top and hot gluing it in place, and then just hot gluing the bottom of the pumpkin to the top of my wooden rounds. And that's it. We have just a little cute decor piece you could put anywhere. It's perfect on a tier tray or just decor around the house. this project, I'm starting with these doilies from the Dollar Tree, and I had this little piece left over, and all I'm doing is I'm going to soak it in some strong cold coffee for 2 hours. After the 2 hours were up, I just removed it from the coffee, squeezed out as much as I could, and then just laid it out on the paper towel to dry. I didn't want the doily to be too dark, I just wanted a beautiful antique white look. Next, I'm grabbing one of these pumpkins from the Dollar Tree, and most of these have wording on it that's in glitter. So all I'm doing is just heating that glue up that's holding the glitter and then just scraping it off. It comes off fairly easy and quick. Next, I'm just sanding everything down in case there's any sparkles left over, and then I'm going to give it 2 coats of this chalk paint coat grotto by Folk Art. After my pumpkin and my doily were nice and dry, I'm just adding some Mod Podge and I'm decoupaging the doily on top of the pumpkin. I was very generous when it came to putting Mod Podge on top of the doily, making sure that I get all the edges. After the Mod Podge has dried, I just cut around the pumpkin. Next, I'm grabbing a satin teal ribbon that I got at the Dollar Tree, making a simple bow, bringing it together with a dollop of hot glue, and then cutting off another piece of ribbon about 2 inches long, and I'm just going to hot glue it around for the center, and that's it. I'm just going to hot glue it on top of the pumpkin and then cut the tails off on a slant. For this project, I'm starting off with a small clay pot, and these pots come 3 in a set at the Dollar Tree. Using some ivory acrylic paint, I'm just going to give it 1 coat. Using the same ivory paint, I'm grabbing a birdhouse and I'm going to paint the body of the birdhouse in that ivory shade. Now I'm grabbing some grotto chalk paint by Folk Art, and I'm going to paint the roof and that bottom portion or that bottom square of the birdhouse and let it dry. Now I'm grabbing this already made little bow, and this was off of one of those small little Dollar Tree pumpkins, and in the center of the bow I'm hot gluing a little teal button. I got it from that button pack from the Dollar Tree. All that's left now is to turn my little clay pot upside down and hot glue the birdhouse right on top. For this project, I'm grabbing this little vase from the Dollar Tree and then some leftover thick yarn that I also got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to start hot gluing it from the bottom and going all the way up. Now I'm just grabbing a decorative burlap ribbon and I'm hot gluing it around my vase, but don't forget to leave just a little bit of an excess to overlap. Now I'm grabbing this blue and teal bushel from the Dollar Tree that comes with a pumpkin in it and putting it inside the vase. I'm starting with a 4x6 frame, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the backing out and I'm going to give it 2 good coats of the Grotto Chalk paint by Folk Art. Next, I'm grabbing these little coffee cup ornaments from the Dollar Tree, and these are nice and wooden, which means that we can stain them. We're going to stain them by using that same Grotto color and adding it to a little bit of water just to water it down, and I'm going to use a sponge brush just because I find it easier to use for this process. It's up to you how dark you want it or how light you want it. Just keep on going back and forth. Add water if you need to water it down. Add more paint if you want it a little thicker, and then just remove the excess water with a little napkin or a paper towel. Then grabbing the paint without being watered down, I'm going to paint the little handle with a small brush. Next, I'm going to grab a cotton ball from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to very carefully unroll it. I'm going to mark with a pencil where I want the mug to be, and then using a hot glue gun, I'm just going to start by adding some hot glue right on that line and hot gluing towards the top of the ornament. The excess cotton, I'm just hot gluing to the back of the ornament. For this next part, I'm going to be using chalk couture to put on a little pumpkin. I'm just going to use some brown and then some white paste and just paste it on and get the excess off, and I'm all done. But you can definitely either print something on your Cricut on your computer, or even grab a pumpkin sticker or any sticker that would match and just put that right on top. Next, I'm grabbing some cardstock and cutting it down to size by using the glass that came with the frame as my guide. Then I'm going to hot glue the cardstock on top of that glass piece. To the top of the cardstock, I'm going to hot glue a piece of scrap burlap that I had left over. And I'm going to put the hot glue straight in the middle because that's going to get covered by our little latte ornament. Next, I'm just cutting off the burlap excess. And then on top of that burlap, I'm going to hot glue our ornament. Now I'm inserting our project back into the picture frame, locking it in, and it's time to display it. For bead garland, I'm first going to grab this wooden round and grab some ivory paint and just lightly go over it just so that our leaf will stand out a little more. And then I'm grabbing one of these Dollar Tree leaves and I'm just going to give it one coat of the grotto paint and let it dry. On one side of my garland, I'm going to have a tassel. And the way I made this tassel was I grabbed some jute cord and wrapped it around my 4 fingers 15 times, and then I cut it off. Next, I'm grabbing a long piece of jute cord and I'm going to put it through the center of my tassel. Then using another piece of jute cord, I'm wrapping it around the top, leaving about half an inch and tying it off. And then the long jute cord that we put through the center of our tassel, I'm just going to tie that off. And since this is the tassel string, one of the sides is going to stay really long and the other side leave 2 to 3 inches. Next, I'm going to cut the bottom of my tassel, making the little fringes, and then I'm going to use a hairbrush to brush my tassel until it's nice and fluffy. Now I'm just going to give my tassel a little bit of a haircut and we have a cute little jute cord tassel. Now I'm going to cut off the long piece of jute cord and I cut off about 20 to 24 inches. And now it's time to put the beads on our tassel. I put a piece of tape at the end of my twine so it's easier to put the beads on. And I just used 3 sizes of beads, the 6, 10, and 14-inch beads. And I just went from smaller to larger, larger to smaller, all throughout my garland. I'm going to leave about 4 to 5 inches of string and then just clip it off. Now on the side that we have the tassel, we did leave about 3 inches of string. I'm going to put some tape over the end of it and I'm going to start feeding it back into our tassel. I do this to prevent from cutting it off at the tip and having the chance of it untangling. This way I'm going to put those 2 to 3 inches through my beads and this is a great way to just lock it in. Now I'm just hot gluing my maple leaf to my wooden round. Then I'm going through my wooden round and I'm going to do 2 loops. After that, I'm going to lock in my twine using the half hitch knot. And then with the twine that's remaining, I'm going to feed it back through the beads of the tassel. And that way it's locked in nicely and securely. For this super easy project, all I'm doing is grabbing one of these wooden boxes from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to give the lid one coat of black chalk paint. Next, I'm going to grab a sunflower I had on hand, hot glue it to the center of my lid, and then flip it over and give it a little bit more hot glue in the back just to make sure the sunflower stays in place. For For this easy project, I'm grabbing the bottom of a wooden box from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to paint the back of it and the sides in a black chalk paint. And then I'm going to grab these stickers that I got at the Dollar Tree, and these are so sweet. They have sunflowers and trucks on them. At the bottom of the project, I'm going to stick on this beautiful red truck with sunflowers in the back. And the second sticker says, "Today is the day." How gorgeous is that? For this project, I'm going to be using this galvanized jar that's attached to this little bar, and this is from the Dollar Tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it black. I gave it 2 coats, and then I'm coming in with some Mod Podge to seal that in. Whenever I paint anything on galvanized metal, or really any metal, I do like to make sure that it's going to stay and not chip, because that is what will happen if you don't seal it in with something like Mod Podge. I'm going to grab the 2 stickers that kind of look like sunflower gardens, put those at the bottom, and then on top I'm going to put "Make It Happen." And I think the contrast between the yellow and black looks so classy and beautiful. Now I'm going to grab my Artist's Loft Silver, and this is an acrylic paint, and I'm just going to give it one light coat so that some of the black is showing through and it looks a little bit like galvanized metal. For a little bit more yellow, I'm just grabbing a yellow grosgrain ribbon from the Dollar Tree, wrapping it around the base of the lid, hot gluing it in place in the back, and cutting off the excess. For this project, I'm going to be using one of my favorite techniques, and it is staining bare wood with some watered down acrylic paint. This is a little pen holder from the Dollar Tree, and of course this is untreated wood. So all I'm doing here is just painting it with some watered down black paint. Since we're making a vase out of this pen holder, I'm going to call it a vase. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep on watering it down, whether it's spraying it on the napkin and then trying to wipe off the excess paint, or just spraying it straight onto my vase and just wiping off the excess. And I'm going to continue doing this until I have enough paint off so that I can see the gorgeous grain of the wood. After my vase has dried, I'm going to grab some yellow grosgrain ribbon, wrap it around the center of the vase, and hot glue it in the back. Now I'm just going to use a bushel of sunflowers from the Dollar Tree, cut them down, and just put them inside the vase. For an extra hold in the vase, I would grab a little floral foam, hot glue it to the base of your vase, and then put in the sunflowers. For this super sweet sunflower garland, I'm going to be using these sunflowers that I got at the Dollar Tree. And these are about an inch long. They're super cute. All I'm doing here is just laying them out and hot gluing a piece of ribbon to the back. I knew my garland was going to be against the tray, so I wasn't worried about my flowers flipping over. But if your garland is going to be somewhere where it's kind of loose, I would hot glue the ribbon about 1/3 from the top of the flower so that the flowers in the garland won't flip over on you when the garland is hanging. When I was done with the garland, all I did was tie it to the sidebars of my Rae Dunn tier tray. We're going to get started with this sweet little truck, and I absolutely love how it turned out. The first thing I am going to do is I'm going to take it apart. I'm just going to use one side of it. The side where the front one stayed on, that's the side I'm going to be using. And then I am going to remove the second piece of wood from the other side, and I'm going to save it till the end because we're going to use it to prop this truck up. Grabbing my white chalk Rust-Oleum paint in linen white, I'm going to give the body of the truck one good coat, including all the edges. Next, I'm grabbing a pencil and I'm outlining the fenders and the tires. And I'm by no means an artist. And the only reason I knew the word fender is because my husband's a truck driver. But I just did my best and I followed the cutouts of the truck itself to find the line of my fenders and my tires. Using a small brush, I'm using an orange paint by Craftmark and I'm just painting the fenders, and I'm also going to go inside that cutout and paint the fender kind of on top of that cutout. So if someone's looking at this truck from a distance, they're going to see that the fenders are kind of continuing all the way around. Now I'm grabbing a small paintbrush that has long, thin bristles on it, and using black chalk paint, I'm going to paint the tires. And obviously, you could just use whatever black paint you have on hand. It's going to look beautiful. Next, I'm grabbing my 5/8 inch buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go all the way around on this one. I want that back to be completely covered in ribbon because I'm kind of going to be using it as a little support for my pumpkins. The pumpkins I'm going to be using come 10 in a pack from the Dollar Tree. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove those things that are supposed to be stumps on top. I don't like the ones that usually come. I love the natural look of grabbing some sticks from the backyard and just hot gluing them in the center of the pumpkin. And I think it makes all the difference in the world. So let me know down below if you do the same thing and if you agree that just grabbing a piece of twig from the backyard is a lot better than just keeping the stump that comes with these pumpkins, or pretty much any pumpkins from the Dollar Tree, because I always do this to all the pumpkins that I get at the Dollar Tree. Now it's time to attach the pumpkins. I'm just grabbing my X-Acto knife, and yes, for those of you with medical background, that is a 15 blade. And I'm going to grab one of those pumpkins and cut them on a slant just so there's something to hold on to, just because they're round and they're going to be suspended in air a little bit. So you need some good base. And yes, if you can use Gorilla Glue for this, please do. It will just give you a stronger hold and nothing is going to move. And so I did my first pumpkin, and then I am adding some hot glue from underneath, so kind of props it up and letting it cool off. For the second pumpkin, I'm going to very carefully press it against the top of that truck right there to kind of mold it into the railing. And then that is where I'm going to put my hot glue and then attach it. I'm going to do the same thing with my third pumpkin and hot glue it in place. The fourth and the fifth pumpkin, I'm just stacking on top of my first three pumpkins, hot gluing them and holding them in place until nicely dried. Now I'm going in the back and just hot gluing everywhere where the pumpkins are touching in the back, so it gives it more security. To complete this project, I'm grabbing that second piece of wood that we broke off initially, and I'm going to hot glue it to the end of our little wooden piece that's still attached to our truck. And that is what's going to keep the truck up. Now, after I displayed the truck, I realized that the top of that wooden piece kind of shows. So I'm just grabbing some white chalk paint and painting that wooden block on top. To start on this mini DIY for you tier tray, what you're going to need are those Jenga blocks from the Dollar Tree. Mine are painted white because they were from a previous project. So what I'm doing is my first Jenga block I'm putting in vertically, then the next three I'm putting in horizontally, and then the fifth one I'm putting in vertically once again, and I'm just hot gluing them all together to form this little rectangle. Here I wanted to show you real quick the Jenga blocks that I'm using. Now I'm grabbing the farmer's market calendar from 2021, and I'm going to be using that back little picture, excuse the interruption over here, and I'm grabbing the one that says autumn harvest, and I'm going to cut it out. After trimming it to fit my little rectangle perfectly, I'm going to hot glue it in place. Next, I'm grabbing some of that 5/8 inch buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to hot glue little strips to the sides of my sign, and I'm hot gluing them in place in the back. For this project, I'm going to be using one of those wooden trays from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to turn it around, and now I'm going to use these maple leaves. I'm going to be using the red ones and the red orange ones only. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack the red ones from the top and from the bottom, and then the red orange ones are going to go towards the center. As I'm moving along, I'm hot gluing each row in place and making sure I cover the sides of the tray. Next, I'm going to pick which side of my tray is going to be the bottom, and I'm going to hot glue the leaves down on that side. Now it's time to make a simple bow using buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I made my loops 5 inches in length and gave a dollop of hot glue in the center to bring the bow together. Now I'm just making sure my tails are even, and with this type of ribbon, I do like to fold it at the bottom. I usually don't cut it because it tends to fray. Now I'm just pinching it in the middle and using an extra piece of the ribbon to bring it together and cover that center of the bow. Grabbing another leaf, I'm going to cover that center, and then I'm going to put my bow about 1/3 down from the top. Next, I'm grabbing a maple leaf sticker I got at the Dollar Tree, and I'm attaching it to the center of the bow. To finish up my project, I'm going to make little waves or little ribbon tails, as I call them, to my bow. And all I did was halfway down, fold my ribbon up, and then fold it back underneath, and that's what's going to make my little wave. And that's just going to give it a very sweet and high-end look to this project. I'm starting this project with this little 4-inch shadow box. It had a little tractor on top, so I'm grabbing my hacksaw and hacking that off, and then using a medium fine sanding block, I'm just sanding it down. After that, I'm grabbing my black chalk paint, and I'm going to give the shadow box one coat of the black chalk paint, and then I went back and inside the shadow box, I gave it one more coat. Next, I'm grabbing these metallic leaves, and I have 2 of these from the orange pumpkins from the Dollar Tree, but you can find these in many pieces of decor, and I'm just going to give them 2 coats of the white chalk paint. Next, I'm grabbing my Mod Podge, and I'm going to seal that white paint in and let it dry for at least half an hour. Now I'm going to hot glue my leaves on the inside, and I just moved one to one side and the other one towards the other side, overlap them, and they look so beautiful against a black background. For the bow, I'm going to be using this Farmhouse buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be making a continuous bow. First, I'm making my loop, then I'm going around my hand and putting the ribbon in between my 3rd and 4th finger, which is my ring finger. I'm holding the beginning of the ribbon and pulling the ribbon through with my pointer and my middle finger. Now all I'm doing is adjusting my loops. You want to adjust them a little smaller than you want, because when you're going to pull everything tight, the loops are going to get bigger. So I just make my loops a little smaller than I want them to be. And then to make them tight, I pull on both of the loops and then adjust it a little more if I have to, holding the center of the bow tight, and then hot gluing my bow on top of my maple leaves. Next, I'm just cutting off the tails on a slant, and we are all done with this gorgeous project. This is going to be a super easy project. I'm grabbing some white chalk paint and I'm going to paint this jar or this vase that I got from the Dollar Tree with one coat of the chalk Rust-Oleum paint. And as you can see, it has little squares all around it. After I painted it, I set it aside for at least an hour so it dried real well. Now I'm coming in with the white chalk Rust-Oleum paint in linen white and I'm dry brushing. That's why I have my napkin on the table. I'm dipping my shabby little brush in my paint and then tapping the paint on my little napkin, and then I'm just dry brushing all the way on my little vase. And as you can see, the squares just come out and they look so beautiful. I absolutely love how this simple project came out. And now to finish it off, I'm just going to do the neck of the vase or the jar, and I filled the inside of the jar with some gorgeous leaf branches that had little berries on them, and of course I got those at the Dollar Tree.